Hello everybody, the UofCWildcat here, and I'm bringing you a brand new set of tutorial videos. These videos will be covering the how to play the new Dragon Ball Z collectible card game released by Panini a few short months ago. This game came out and was flying off the shelves, so much so that even half the product was on back order for so long. I will be releasing these videos and I will give you a bunch of options to choose from in how you want to learn the video. But first, let's go over a brief history of the game. Back in 2000, Score Entertainment released their first set of the Dragon Ball Z collectible card game, the Saiyan Saga. While untuned and unrefined, the game took off and produced 18 expansions. These expansions were labeled as sagas and contained Saiyan, Frieza, Trunks, Android, Cell, Cell Games, World Games, Babidi, Buu, Fusion, and Kid Buu for the Dragon Ball Z arc. It also went into the Dragon Ball GT arc, releasing a Baby Saga, Super Android 17, Shadow Dragon, and the Lost Episodes. Each set release alternated the way they released cards. Saiyan Saga released with the traditional booster packs, but also had starter decks, which contained a random personality set, 50 cards, 3 of which were foiled, the Z Scouter, and an Anger Sword. We'll get into more detail about what all these are when we discuss how the game is played. The next expansion was the Frieza Saga, and it only contained booster packs. The trend would continue, alternating starter deck expansions and booster packs expansions through the run of the game. In 2004, the last set, The Lost Episodes, released, and after being bogged down by a lot of new mechanics added in the Shadow Dragon set, the game eventually died off. If you're still interested in playing the game, there are still events that go on. There is a page on Facebook as well as a site for the Retro Dragon Ball Z game. These guys still hold events, as there was an event at the last Gen Con for everybody who still had their old cards. They release virtual sets every once in a while that the cards are still allowed to be used in their retro game. If you're interested, I'll link you to their homepage as well as their Facebook page in the description below. In October 17th, 2014, Panini America released a remake of the original Score game to great acclaim. The game was an immediate hit with everybody who was familiar with the old Score game and has a great learning curve for those who want to get started. And here we are today. So let's get into the core basics of the game. You will assume the role of a notable Dragon Ball Z character in his battles of epic proportion. Normal games match up 2 opponents. Each player has a personality set of character cards from 1 to 4. All the personality cards must be the same. Each player also needs a mastery card. The mastery has special powers that come into play all during the game. The players will also have a deck constructed of 60 cards. All the cards either must be the same style as your mastery, have the same name as your personality, or even cards that have no style at all. This will form what is called your life deck. Deck construction will be covered in more detail later on. One final thing that the players need is something to gauge their anger level. A die or an Anger Sword from the old Z game will do best. There are 3 main ways to win the game. The first and the most simple is the beatdown victory. You beat down your opponent until they have no more cards in their life deck, thus giving you the win. The second way to win is to win by most powerful main personality, or MPPV. To do this, you need to get to your highest level on your main personality. Once this is done, when you hit 5 anger, then you win the game. The final way to win is to collect all 7 of the Mystic Dragon Balls on your side of the field. The moment this is done, you call Shenron or Porunga and get your wish granted and win the game. Let's next go over what each type of card is. There are personality cards, masteries, allies, Dragon Balls, setups, drills, events, physical combats, and energy combats. First, let's tackle the personality cards. On the personality cards, there are a few key markings that are important. First, in the upper left corner is the level indicator. Every personality has 4 levels, which all must be used for your decks. The next spot are the numbers along the right side of the card. These are your power stages. These are used to take damage and pay for your attacks. The numbers inside the power stages also indicate your power rating when calculating damage. Also along the power stages is the personality alignment. There are heroes and villains. For the heroes, the starter deck personalities are Goku, Gohan, Krillin, and Piccolo, while Trunks is a booster pack personality. For the villains, the starter deck personalities are Vegeta and Frieza, while Captain Ginyu is the booster pack personality. You can also indicate your alignment by looking at the card background. Heroes have the blue backgrounds, while the villains have the red backgrounds. The next key to your personality is the PUR, or Power Up Rating. This is what your personality will gain each turn when they power up. The final part of the personality is the personality power. There are two types of powers. First are the power personality powers. These are a one-time use power per combat. Usually, these are either an attack or a special event. The other is a constant combat power, denoted by an infinity symbol. These powers are always active and have effects that will aid you during your combat. The next card type we'll look at are the mastery cards. Masteries are cards that start on the field and stay on the field throughout the entire game. They provide you with strong abilities that you can use throughout the entire game. There are 6 masteries which will all amplify certain styles. Masteries all have constant effects that are ongoing throughout the game, like Black Devious Mastery, which gives your attacks +1 life card and +1 stage of damage. Other masteries also have a second effect, which is a power effect. These effects can only be used once per combat, similar to powers of your personality. The ongoing powers are always active like constant combat powers for your personalities. Masteries must coordinate with your declared style of your deck. This means you must all have the same styled cards in your deck as your mastery, so black style cards must be in your black deck with your Black Devious Mastery. This makes players choose a certain style and then stick to it. The next card type are the allies. Allies are similar to personalities. They are comrades who will come to your personality's side and help you defeat your opponent. The basic layout of an ally is the same as a personality. They have the same power stage setup, personality power, PUR, and level indicator. There are slight differences though, and other keys to know about your allies. Allies have purple backgrounds and their affiliation is ally instead of hero or villain. This keeps them separate from the personalities as they are a different type of card. With the hero and villain part replaced, all allies have in their power box heroes only or villains only, which will denote which affiliation it is. So unlike the old Score Z game, the personalities cannot be used as allies and your allies cannot be used as personalities. Allies have their powers, but they can only use them in special situations. If your personality is 1 power stage above the 0 mark or at the 0 mark, your allies can make action and use their attacks to fight your foe. There are some personalities who allow your allies to make an action no matter what your power stage is. Take Captain Ginyu Body Change for example. At Captain Ginyu's 3rd stage, you can allow your Ginyu Force allies to take action regardless of your power stages. This is one of those effects. Some allies also have constant combat powers which are always active, just like personality powers. Take Nappa, Space Traveler for example. His power says setups cannot be used. This effect is ongoing until Nappa is taken out of play. This proves to be a big move for some decks and make allies strong threats for you and your opponent to tackle. The next card type to look at are the Dragon Balls. There are 7 Dragon Balls in the game so far. The set of Dragon Balls are the Namek Dragon Balls. Like stated before, by collecting and having all 7 Dragon Balls in play on your side of the field, you summon Porunga in this instance and win the game. This is a tough task as the Dragon Balls in play are liable to being taken from you. Dragon Balls can only be played during certain phases or by card effects. When a Dragon Ball enters play, depending on how it came into play, the effect of the Dragon Ball may activate, giving you a bonus. If you play a Dragon Ball into play on your own, you will get to use its effect. If a card says, place a Dragon Ball into play, or search your life deck for a Dragon Ball and place it into play, the Dragon Ball's effect does not activate, so make sure you play your cards right, or else the Dragon Ball's effect may not aid you. The next card type are the setups. Setups are cards that are placed into play and can be used as an action later in combat. These setups have effects that will either help you or attack your opponent. Take Blue Battle Readiness for example. Blue Battle Readiness gets an ally from your life deck and places it into play 3 stages above 0, and an ally from your discard pile and places it into play 3 stages above 0. This obviously is helping keep those allies that help you so much in play, as well as search one out of your life deck. Then take Black Searching Technique. You search your opponent's life deck for 2 non-Dragon Ball cards and banish them from the game. This is an effect that is hurting your opponent, so setups go both ways. But during your combat, these setups will count as one of your actions, so be sure to use them in the correct instances. The next card type we will look at are the drills. Drills are similar to setups, but they are effects that last until they are taken out of play, almost exactly the same as allies with constant combat powers. Drill effects are strong in that they give you bonuses for certain situations, or give you effects that can activate in certain situations. Take Orange Aura Drill. Your energy attacks do +2 life cards of damage. This boosts all of your energy attacks until it's taken out of play. While you may be thinking having 3 Orange Aura Drills in play would be a very strong drills combination, you cannot stack multiple style drills into play. So if you already have one Orange Aura Drill, you cannot play another Orange Aura Drill into play. Though you only have one of each drill in play at a time, they can be very deadly when you stack multiple drills out and have a plethora of effects aiding you in trying to beat your opponent. The next card type we will cover are event cards. Events provide effects for you throughout combat. They are played as an action and will provide you an effect. They are played from your hand, so no need to set them aside for your opponent to know what they are and when they're coming. These effects are very useful, and some can be considered staples for most decks. Let's look at one of the biggest ones, Stare Down. This card is a villains only card, and it allows you to look at your opponent's hand and discard a card. So not only can you know what is in your opponent's hand, you can also take away a strong card that they have, giving you an advantage. There are also 2 cards which will counter other events. These are 2 of the new ultra rare cards, Heroic Energy Sphere and Villainous Energy Sphere. Both of these cancel the effects of an event and provide different secondary effects for the user. So when your opponent plays an effect, like Stare Down, you can use a Heroic Sphere or a Villainous Sphere to counter that effect and stop your opponent from seeing your hand and even discarding or taking away a card that is very strong. But be aware, your energy spheres can also be sphered themselves. The final card types we will tackle are the energy and physical combat cards. But to do this effectively, we need to break down the types of energy combats and physical combat cards. There are physical attacks, energy attacks, physical blocks, and energy blocks. Every physical or energy combat card will have 2 swords crossing or a shield symbol. The swords crossing denotes that the card is an attack, while the shield denotes that it's a block. First, we'll discuss the attacks. During a combat and during your action phase, you can perform an attack against your opponent. Attacks will either deal power stages of damage or life cards of damage against your opponent. Most physical attacks will be dealing power stages of damage, while most energy attacks deal life cards of damage. Most energy attacks have a cost to them though, which you'll need to pay in order to perform the attack. Usually these are power stages. This isn't to say though that physical attacks never have a cost to perform them. Take Red Right Cross for example, which cost 4 power stages to perform. So if you're only at 3 stages above 0, you would not be able to perform Red Right Cross, thus the attack is useless in your hand. Most attacks also have 2 types of effects. There are secondary effects and hit effects, otherwise known as if successful effects. Secondary effects are effects that happen before any damage is taken or any block is performed. Take Orange Stare Down for example. It is an energy attack that costs 2 stages to deal 4 life cards to your opponent. The secondary effect says, banish an opponent's setup, drill, or ally. The secondary effect would take place before any damage is taken or your opponent has a chance to perform a block. The other type of effects are hit effects. The effects only activate when your opponent cannot stop your attack. So take the card Saiyan Sabotage for example. It is a physical attack that does the attack table stages, but then it says hit, banish a setup or drill. So unless your opponent can stop this attack, he will then have to banish a setup or drill from play. If your opponent stopped the attack though, the hit effect does not activate. But say your opponent plays Blue Rest. Blue Rest is an event that prevents all damage from an attack and is placed at the bottom of your life deck. Preventing all damage from attack does not stop the attack, thus the hit effect will activate and you will get to banish a setup or drill in play. Let's now look at the blocks. When your opponent performs an attack in his action, you get a chance to respond as an action. This is similar to when your opponent performs an event and you can use an energy sphere to stop the effect. All blocks will state in their text box on what they stop, whether it be a physical or energy attack. Some blocks even stop both physical and energy attacks. Blocks also have effects which coincide with blocking the attack. Take Black Knee Catch. It says stop a physical attack. Raise your anger 2 levels. By stopping a physical attack, you will gain 2 anger as well. Now, since we've covered blocks, we need to cover two more things that pertain to damage. When taking life cards of damage, you take the top card of your life deck one at a time and flip it over and reveal it. Some of those cards will have Endurance X, where X is some number on the card. This number means that when taking life cards of damage and you reveal a card like this, you can remove it from the game instead of placing it in your discard pile. You then add the number to that damage that you've taken to count towards it. So say your opponent performs an attack and you cannot block it. The damage you must take is 5 cards. While taking damage, you reveal the first card and it has no endurance. The second card reveals itself and has 2 endurance. At this point, you may remove it from the game to make the damage from this point go from 2 to 4 life cards. This also means you only have to take 1 more life card of damage. This way, you only took 3 actual cards of damage instead of the full 5 life cards. The final point on damage we need to discuss is the term critical damage. During the game, when you deal 5 or more actual life cards of damage to an opponent, you now hit critical damage. Once you have done so, you are able to use a critical damage effect. There are 3 effects to choose from. You can destroy an opponent's ally in play, capture a Dragon Ball, or lower your opponent's anger 1 level. Notice I said actual life cards. As we stated before, with Endurance, you can make 5 life cards of damage, 3 actual life cards. Thus, the importance of Endurance. There are also card effects that let you use critical damage effects. These also fall in the line of capturing a Dragon Ball, destroying an ally in play, or lowering your opponent's anger 1 level. Now that we've covered all the types of cards, let's now talk about how the game is played. To start each game, both players will take their 1 to 4 personalities and mastery and set them aside. Next, players will shuffle their decks and offer the opponent to cut, for fairness of course. Players will then set their level 1 personality in front of them and set their power stages to 5 stages above 0. Both players will then roll dice to see who goes first. The high roll wins. Each turn has 5 steps: the draw step, the planning step, combat step, the discard step, and then finally the rejuvenation step. To fully understand each turn, let's delve into these steps. First, there's the draw step. This step is simply drawing 3 cards and placing them into the hand, thus ending the draw step. The following step is the planning step. For the planning step, you can place allies, setups, Dragon Balls, or drills from your hand into play. Allies come into play at 3 stages above 0. Drills most likely have constant effects, and setups can only be placed and must wait to be activated later on in combat. You can also play Dragon Balls, but when the balls come into play, you must use all their effects, so be wary. Also at this time, you will power up any allies and your personality by their PUR ratings, thus ending the planning step. After this step, the player whose turn it is must make a decision. Depending on the situation, the active player can declare combat against the opponent, thus initiating the combat step. If they do not want to, they will proceed to the 4th step, the discard step. But let's talk about the combat step for now. Once the combat step is initiated, any and all when entering combat effects on the field can activate before the defender draws their cards. Starting with the active player, his when entering combat effects will activate, then when he's done, the defender's when entering combat effects will activate. These effects include cards on the field or in either player's hands. Let's take Piccolo's weighted clothing for example. After the text in the parentheses, it says, when entering combat as the defender, your opponent skips his first action. Gain X stages. X is your PUR. While a very strong card, you must use this before you draw cards, so it must be the only card in your hand when you get entered on. Once all when entering effects have been activated, the defending player will draw their 3 cards and combat will begin. Starting with the active player, they get to perform an action. This can be using a physical or energy attack, using an event, using a personality power, using a setup in play on their side of the field, or if you have nothing else to do, passing. Opponents will have the opportunity to respond to certain things like any events or any attacks. Once a player finishes their action, the other player gets to perform their own action. This will alternate until both players consecutively pass. Once they've both done so, the combat will end and the discard step will occur. During the discard step, both players will discard cards from their hand until they only have 1 card left in their hand. There are card effects which will enhance your end of the turn hand size, but the base amount is 1 card per the end of the combat. The final step is the rejuvenation step. This step only occurs if the active player did not declare combat. If the active player did not declare combat,
They will then take the top card of their discard pile and place it at the bottom of their life deck, or rejuvenate the top card of their discard pile. After this step, the active player's turn is over, and the opponent will go through the same steps for his turn. This will continue to alternate until there is a winner decided. Let's now look into a simulated match. Player A is playing a black Krillin deck, while the opponent, player B, is playing a blue Ginyu deck. To start the match, players will lay out their main personality and their deck. Their main personality will be set 5 stages above 0, and their anger set to 0. Players will roll die to see who goes first. High roll wins. And it looks like Ginyu has won the die roll. So player B will begin by drawing 3 cards for his turn, the draw step. He draws Jace, Ginyu Force, Stare Down, and Blue Betrayal. This completes the draw step, and player B will move on to the planning step. During this step, he can place allies, setups, Dragon Balls, or drills, as well as power up for the turn. So player B will place Jace into play 3 above 0. Player B does not have any more setups, allies, Dragon Balls, or drills, so he then powers up. Captain Ginyu's PUR is 2, while Jace's PUR is 1. Both will gain stages equal to that number. Player B now has the option of initiating combat, but since he knows player A can draw 3 cards and he would be down 1 card, he decides to pass combat. By skipping the combat step, we go directly to the discard step. Both players must discard to 1 card minimum. Player B discards Blue Betrayal. We now move to the rejuvenation step, where player B may rejuvenate the top card of his discard pile into his life deck. Player B decides to rejuvenate, thus putting Blue Betrayal at the bottom of his life deck. This concludes player B's first turn, and we move to player A's turn. Player A draws 3 cards. He draws Namek Dragon Ball 7, Heroic Energy Sphere, and Visiting the Past. Now to the planning step. Player A places Visiting the Past into play. He can also place Namek Dragon Ball 7 into play. It says, place 3 cards from your discard pile on top of your life deck, and your opponent discards the top 3 cards of his life deck. The second effect looks promising, but the first effect would do nothing since there are no cards in the discard pile. So player A elects to wait. Player A now powers up by Krillin's PUR, which is 3, thus giving 3 stages. Player A now must decide if he wants to enter combat. Since he has a Dragon Ball in a non-attacking event, he decides to skip combat. Player A now discards. He discards the Dragon Ball. Since he discarded the Dragon Ball, it automatically goes to the bottom of his life deck instead of the discard pile. Then, he goes to the rejuvenation step. He does not have any cards in his discard pile, so he cannot rejuvenate this turn. Now the turn passes back to player B. Player B will draw his 3 cards, which are Blue Shifting Maneuver, Blue Draining Blast, and Blue Guard. During the planning step, player B has nothing to play, so he just powers up both Jace and Ginyu by their PURs. Player B now can decide on entering combat. This time he decides he wants to enter combat. First, player B will use any when entering combat effects he has. Since player B has none, player A will have an opportunity. Player A does have Visiting the Past, which grabs a card from his discard pile when entering combat. Player A does not have a discard pile though, so he cannot use this effect. Since both players have no viable when entering combat effects, player A draws 3 cards. He draws Black Energy Web, Devastating Blow, and Black Swipe. Player B now has his first action, and he can play any of the 4 cards currently in his hand, or use his personality power. Player B uses Stare Down. This card allows the user to look at the opponent's hand and select a card to discard from that hand. But wait, player A uses Heroic Energy Sphere, which cancels the effect of an event. Stare Down's effect is negated, and player A can rejuvenate a card, but again, there are no cards in the discard pile, so both cards just go to the discard pile. Player A will now be able to have his action. He uses Devastating Blow, which is a physical attack. The secondary effect will trigger, now allowing player A to gain 1 anger, lower his opponent's anger 2, and banish 3 cards from his opponent's discard pile. Player A gains the anger, but his opponent has no anger, so there's no anger to lower. He then removes the only card in his opponent's discard pile, which is Stare Down, from the game. Player B now has an opportunity to block the attack. Player B will activate the ability of Blue Protective Mastery. He can discard an energy combat card from his hand to stop a physical attack. He also can raise or lower a player's anger, so player A discards Blue Guard to stop the attack, and raise his anger by 1. Blue Guard also has an effect that states, when it is discarded from a hand by card effect, you draw a card. So player B will draw a card and he draws Ginyu's Body Switch. Player B will now have the action, and he uses Ginyu's power. It's an energy attack which costs 3 stages and does 4 life cards of damage. The secondary effect will activate, allowing player B to search out an ally from his life deck and place it into play. He grabs Raccoon, Ginyu Force, and places him into play at 4 stages above 0. The effect also has a hit effect. If the attack is successful, player B can select any of his allies to take over combat regardless of what Ginyu's power stages are at. This is a very strong effect, but the attack must be successful for it to work. Player A will use Black Swipe to stop the attack though. By doing so, player B does not get the effect, and player A takes no damage. The action goes back to player A, and he will use Black Energy Web, a strong energy attack that does 6 life cards of base damage and costs 2 stages to perform. It has no secondary effect, but a great hit effect that states your opponent cannot perform energy attacks for the remainder of combat. This is great for player A who has no more blocks in his hand. If this hits, he can avoid a good chunk of damage this turn. And with Black Devious Mastery's ongoing effect, the effect also bumps up +1 life card and +1 power stage of damage to his attacks. Thus, the damage from this attack would be 7 life cards and 1 power stage of damage. Because of the strength of this attack, player B will use Blue Shifting Maneuver, which can stop either a physical or energy attack, but is banished unless the user has 3 anger. Player B does not, so the card is banished from the game. Player B now has the action again. He will use Blue Draining Blast. This is an attack that does 4 life cards of damage, and unlike most energy attacks, has no base cost. This is a strong card that only gets better with its secondary effect. You can pay stages to bolster its damage. For every 2 stages, you add 1 life card of damage. Player B decides to play all the rest of his stages, which is 6, to add 3 life cards of damage to this attack, making the attack do 7 life cards. Player A has no blocks, so he must take the damage. To do this, he must reveal the top card of his life deck and move it to the discard pile. You do this one at a time, hoping that a card with endurance comes up so you can avoid critical damage. First, player A reveals Black Squirrel. No endurance, so it goes to the discard pile. Next card is Black Barrage, and no endurance again. Battle Pausing is the next card, and still no endurance. Unless a card with Endurance 2 comes up next, player A will have taken critical damage and allow player B to use a critical damage effect. And up comes Black Defensive Burst, which has no endurance. Player A has now taken critical damage. After the rest of the damage has been taken, player B may now use a critical damage effect. The next 2 cards are Black Corruption and then Black Power Up. Player B now either lowers player A's anger, destroys an ally in play, or captures a Dragon Ball. Since player A does not have an ally or Dragon Ball in play, player B decides player A to lower player A's anger 1 level. Player A can now retaliate. While player A has no cards in his hand, he still has his personality power. It's an effect that allows the user to perform an energy attack, doing base damage of 4 life cards, and it costs 2 stages to perform. The next time a card is discarded from a hand during the combat, player A can use a critical damage effect. This is a very good secondary effect as well, and with the mastery, player B must take 5 life cards and 1 power stage of damage unless he can block. Since he cannot, he takes the damage. He will have Raccoon take the 1 stage because any ally can take any stages of damage. For the life cards, Ginyu will hope to avoid critical damage or else he could lose Raccoon or Jace. So Ginyu flips the first card and it's Blue Betrayal. No endurance, so we continue. Next card is Birder, Ginyu Force. He has no endurance, so we go to the next card. The next card is Namek Dragon Ball 2. When a Dragon Ball is flipped over for damage, you check the field to see if it's in play. If Namek Dragon Ball 2 was in play, it would be banished, but since it's not, it goes to the bottom of the life deck and is not counted towards damage. So player B still only has 2 life cards of damage taken. The next card revealed is Blue Head Knock, and lo and behold, it has 2 endurance. Player B can now banish it from the game and have it count as the initial life card for being revealed, as well as 2 more life cards for the endurance 2, thus being a total of 3 life cards. With that, player B has taken all 5 life cards of damage and only taken 3 actual life cards of damage and avoided critical damage. Player B now gets the action. Since he's at 0, his allies can take control of combat and use their abilities. So Blue Draining Blast not only did a huge chunk of damage, but now allowed player B to get his allies to use their abilities. So he will have Raccoon use his power. It's a physical attack that does the damage based on the AT, or attack table. It also has a hit effect that allows player B to have his main personality lose 2 stages to draw the bottom card of his discard pile. Unfortunately, this does not work since Ginyu is at 0 and the attack will still do the damage though. Let's now check the attack table to calculate the damage. Raccoon is at 10,000 while Krillin is at 2,000. Krillin is in column B while Raccoon is in column C. You follow the two columns until they connect, and that is the AT damage. It is 2, which means Krillin will have to take 2 stages of damage, so he lowers himself 2 stages. Player A now has the action again, but has nothing to use. He will now have to pass the action back over to Player B. Player B will now use Jace's power. It's an energy attack that does 5 life cards of damage and costs 2 stages to perform. His secondary effect allows Player B to raise any player's anger. Player B will decide to raise his own anger. Player A cannot block, so he must take the damage again. The first card is Black Speedy Dodge, so there's no endurance there. The next one is Black Swipe, and it has endurance too, so there are 4 life cards. Only one more to go, and it's Black Interceptor Barrage, which does have 1 endurance, but there is no more damage to take, so Player A will just put it in the discard pile. Player A must pass again, and Player B unveils a huge card in Captain Ginyu's Body Switch. This card states that once used, you forfeit the right to win by most powerful main personality victory, and the card is banished. If your opponent's main personality power level is higher than your main personality's power level, you raise your anger 6 levels. Since Krillin is at 1,200 and Ginyu is at 0, Player B will gain 6 anger and level. Captain Ginyu will be at level 2 and then go to full or his highest power stage. Player A passes again and Player B uses Captain Ginyu's level 2 power. It's an energy attack that does 4 life cards of damage and costs 2 stages to perform. The secondary effect says, search your discard pile for an ally and place him into play at 5 stages above 0. Raise your anger X, where X is the number of Ginyu Force allies in play. So Player B searches his discard pile and finds Birder, who is discarded via damage earlier in combat. Birder enters play, and since there are 3 Ginyu Force allies in Raccoon, Birder, and Jace, Player B gains 3 anger. Now to the damage. The damage also gets a boost from Birder's constant effect, where all attacks do +2 stages if Captain Ginyu is your main personality. So the attack will do 4 life cards and 2 stages. Player A cannot block again, so he starts to take his life cards of damage. First he reveals Confrontation, which has no endurance. But the second card is Black Knee Catch, which has endurance 1, so Player A removes that and is now at 3 life cards of damage. After one more, which is Black Energy Web, Player A is done taking damage after he takes his 2 stages as well. Player A passes again, and finally, Player B is out of things to play and passes as well. This means that the combat phase is over. We move to the discard step, and since both players do not have any cards in their hand, they do not have anything to discard. And since the combat step occurred, there is no rejuvenation step, so we move back to Player A's turn. But let's fast forward a bit further into the battle. After having a rough first combat, it looks like Krillin has fought back and gotten the game a bit closer. Player B has Ginyu at level 3 with all the Ginyu Force and Nappa on the field, while Player A just has Visiting the Past and Black Power Up in play. It's Player A's turn, and he draws his 3 cards. He already had Time as a Warrior's tool in his hand, and he draws Heroic Energy Sphere, Black Finger Block, and Battle Pausing. Player A decides this will have to be the turn to try and win, so he enters. Since Nappa is in play, Player A cannot use the when entering effect of Visiting the Past, and Player B has no when entering effects, so Player B will draw his 3 cards. He had Blue Defensive Flight in his hands, and a quick side note, you may notice this card has a different style than the other cards. There are a few cards that have yellow titles. These cards are direct reprints from the old Score Z game. The rules state you can use the old cards from the old game if the new ones have gold text. There is a list of cards that you can do this for, and it will be linked in the description. There is only one yellow text card that cannot do this, and it's Saiyan Surprise, which was accidentally printed with yellow text. After that brief side note, let's go back to Player B's draw phase. He draws his own Time as a Warrior's tool, Blue Terror, and Blue Reverse. Player A will open his action with Battle Pausing. By banishing a card from his hand, he can draw the top 2 cards of his discard pile, and his opponent gains 5 stages. Since Player B has no spheres, it will go through. While Ginyu will gain 3 stages and go to full, Player A will draw Krillin's Destructo Disc and Black Barrage. Player B now gets his action, and with his constant combat ability, his allies can take control of combat no matter his stages. So Jace will use his power to do 7 life cards of damage and 2 stages with Ginyu's power and Birder's power adding on to that damage. Player B also gains an anger, which gets him to 4 anger. Player A uses Time is a Warrior's tool, which stops a physical or energy attack and stops all attacks for the remainder of combat. This protects Player A from all attacks. Player A will now use his power to do 5 life cards and 1 stage of damage, with Black Devious Mastery. Player B also plays Time is a Warrior's tool, but Player A uses another Heroic Sphere, another event cancelled by a Heroic Sphere. This stops the effect of the block. Since Player B attempted to block with Time is a Warrior's tool, and the effect was cancelled, he does not get a chance to try and block again, thus making him have to take the damage. He begins by discarding Blue Betrayal, then visiting the past. Both had no endurance, and the next one is overpowering attack. If there is no endurance on this last card, Player B will take critical damage. But it is stare down, and that means the last card is Blue Arm Blast, which doesn't matter. That's 5 life cards, and Player A can activate a critical damage effect. He cannot discard an ally due to Captain Ginyu's power, which prevents so he decides to lower Player B's anger. Player B will now use Blue Reverse, knowing that the game is all but over. Since Time is a Warrior's tool's effect is still active, any attack he plays will be blocked anyway. Player A uses Krillin's Destructo Disc in his action. This is an energy attack that does 5 life cards and 1 stage of damage after modifiers, but the secondary effect is what makes it great. This attack cannot be stopped or prevented, so Player B must take the damage and cannot use Endurance to prevent. His first discard is Blue Rest, which does have 2 Endurance, but he cannot use it. He then reveals Namek Dragon Ball 4, which goes to the bottom of his life deck. He then discards Blue Defensive Flight, and after that reveals that the only card in his life deck is Namek Dragon Ball 4. If he were discarding cards via a card effect from the top of his life deck, he would still be alive. But since this is damage and Player B has initiated a Dragon Ball loop, it means that Player A wins the game by beatdown victory. Now that we've simulated a game, let us get into some things that have been covered in the latest Q&A section on Panini America's Dragon Ball Z page. There are some clarifications to some card wordings and other notes to know. The big one to discuss is the playing versus placing of cards into play. Some cards say play X, where X is some form of a card, while others say place X into play. For example, let's look at Namekian Palm Shot and Namekian Dragon Clan. Namekian Palm Shot's secondary effect states, search your life deck for a Dragon Ball and place it into play. Namekian Dragon Clan, on the other hand, says, search your life deck for a Dragon Ball and play it. The ruling via the Q&A says that when you place a card into play, you cannot use its power for the Dragon Ball. Therefore, Namekian Palm Shot would not be getting a Dragon Ball for you to use, unless the ball has a constant effect, like Dragon Ball 1 or Dragon Ball 6. Namek Dragon Ball Clan, however, would let you use the effect of said ball. This also affects the cost of cards. Take Black Reflection for example. It searches your opponent's banish zone for an attack card and play it. Since it says play, you must be able to pay the cost. So if it costs 2 stages to perform, but you only have 1 stage, you cannot play that card. The final thing I'll address from the Q&A is the MPPV ruling. If you recall, once you hit 5 anger on level 4, you win the game. There are cards that modify the anger that you need to advance, whether it be Blue Protective Mastery, which makes you have to gain 6 anger to level, or Sand Analytic Drill, which says you need to gain 1 less anger to advance a level, but they do not affect the win condition. So if you are at level 4, no matter what modifiers are on the field to change what anger you need to level, it does not change having to reach 5 anger to win the game once you are at level 4. Those are the 2 main rulings from the Q&A. There are plenty of more things there, and I highly recommend going there and checking it out for yourself. I'll leave a link to the site in the description for you guys to check out. And with that, I conclude my tutorial of how to play the new Panini Dragon Ball Z collectible card game. Hopefully this video has given you the best chance to fully understand the game. If you have any questions, comment below and I will do my best to answer those questions. I've been playing the game since the old Score game release, and I've been playing since October 17th when the Panini game dropped, so I feel I have a pretty good understanding of this game and will have a great chance to answer your question. If you found the video helpful, I implore you to leave a like rating. If you do this and you share the video and spread it out to everybody who wants to learn the game, it's the best way to make the community as good as it was back in the old Score Z days. I really want to get this game back to its potential, and I see it going there, but we need to spread this video for those who want to learn the game. If you enjoyed the video, do be sure to subscribe, as I plan to release a lot more Pan-Z video content, like deck build videos and even some battles. I may even do some bi-weekly metagame discussions if that sounds appealing. Leave feedback in the description for what you'd like to see Pan-Z wise. Thanks again for watching the video. This is the UofCWildcat, signing out.